Welcome to the Ed Collab Gathering 2022. We are here to have a conversation around transformational coaching, talking about impactful coaching that disrupts harmful systems and promotes agency. My name is Dr. Tawanda Harris. I am the author of The Right Tools, a guide to vetting and evaluating resources. I have over 20 years of experience in education, ranging from the classroom to the district level. In addition, I am an adjunct professor as well as a consultant.
I am so excited to be here with you. My name is Tamika Thomas. I also have 20 plus years of experience in education. I have worked in every level from elementary school all the way up to post secondary. I am currently a literacy coordinator in a large urban school district, and we are very excited to be here with you today.
As you go through this session, remember to tweet out any things that affirm your thinking or any nuggets that you think would be helpful for others to know about. On Twitter, our handles are Tamika A. Thomas, as well as my handle being Dr. T. Harris. And don't forget to hashtag the Ed Collab Gathering.
So, let me first start by giving you our learning roadmap for this session. We're going to start with thinking about our perception and the role that perception plays in how we understand the world around us. We're going to think about pedagogy and we're going to have some discussion around how our own belief systems impact our pedagogy. And then we're going to end with thinking about different ways that we can change our thought processes in order to make changes that are applicable to the classroom.
So let's start off by thinking about a wonderful quote from Dr. Kim Parker's new book, Literacy is Liberation. I'll go ahead and read it, but as I read this quote, I want you to think about any words that resonate with you, any words that just really just kind of jump out to you and just make you have a notice or a wonder. Educators are responsible for selecting and teaching challenging, relevant curriculum that centers the highest belief or what for what their students can attain. Tamika, what are some of the things or the words that kind of jump out to you?
Well, for me, Dr. Harris, the first thing that jumps out is responsible, right? That as educators, we are responsible for what we select, how we teach, and the ways in which we challenge our students. So that for me was a big jump out.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much, Miss Thomas. And so, as you thought about that, I do agree. Those are some of the things that jumped out to me as well. But this part right here, that this part of the quote that Dr. Kim Parker says around the highest belief. She says that the highest belief, excuse me, relevant curriculum, it centers the highest belief for what their students can attain. So as we go throughout the session, there are some things that we'll think about as coaches, as you support teachers, what are our beliefs? And how do those beliefs show up in our work? Because our beliefs determine what we allow students to experience or what we create for students to experience. Our beliefs also influence our expectations that we have for learning and our students. And also it influences things like the language that we how we refer to our students. Are we thinking from a deficit mindset? Are we speaking from their strengths? Do we believe that they're able to make progress? So I want you to think about these things as we go throughout the remainder of the session. What are your beliefs and your values? Your beliefs and your values, again, they directly impact your expectations, the expectations that you have for the teachers that you're supporting, as well as your expectations that you have as to how the teachers could directly impact students. In addition, I want you to consider your actions as to how you support teachers in this work, how you model expectations, how you are a model for the way that you are referring to students, how you are able to support and give feedback, have conversations, courageous conversations, as Glenn Singleton talks about in his book, Courageous Conversations Around Race. And then lastly, your influence. As a supporter of teachers, you have influence. That influence lives in the very interactions that you're having with teachers. How are you helping teachers to rethink their references to what students are able to accomplish? Are the conversations leaning towards what students aren't able to do, what students have missed during the year, what students cannot achieve? Or are they leaning towards the conversations around what students are able to do, the strengths that we could leverage in order to get students to make progress, or to make improvements? In addition, thinking about conversations around data. Are we only considering the quantitative data, the numbers? Or are we helping teachers to rethink the big picture? Think about all of the points of data, the quantitative as well as the qualitative, the narratives that are being laid out with the different data points.
So, what we're going to do now is we are going to see a picture, and I want you to think about the narrative. So, I'm going to show you this picture, and I want you to think about the story. What is the story that comes to mind when you see this picture? Just take a couple of seconds, and Dr. Harris and I are going to think about it as well. Okay, Dr. Harris, so you are up. What is the narrative for you when you look at this picture?
Well, I would say an emotion that I think about that this individual is experiencing would be sadness, hopelessness. Um, it seems as though because she's young, maybe she is trying to escape or get away from something or a traumatic situation.
Hmm.
She looks alone.
Hmm. Very interesting. So I had some of those same thoughts, but mostly around the lines of getting away from something. I watch a lot of ID channel. And so for me, I look at the picture and I see someone who is escaping, maybe a kidnapping of some sort, and she is trying to get away. So that's what I see when I see the picture. Now, I'm sure that as you looked at the picture, you also had some thoughts about the narrative and what it could be. So I want to show you another picture now. Here is the bigger picture to what is actually happening. So you can see in the bigger picture that we are looking at a girl in the middle of an actual wreckage that was caused by a massive earthquake in Japan. I want you to think for a second about how that changes for you what it is that you're actually seeing, right? Because now we know that this is actually a picture of an earthquake. And I know for me, I was thinking someone who needed help because she had been kidnapped. But in reality, there's a different kind of help that she probably needs that I don't know how to give her. And I certainly wouldn't know in Japan exactly where to direct her and guide her towards. So here's what I want you to think about. I want you to think about your initial interpretation, and I want you to think about what you see now and how your interpretation might influence your response. So, in the first one, Tawana and I both saw someone who needed help, But what we identified as the help that she needed, our responses would have been based on that, not based on what she actually needs, which is what you see here. And so, what's important to note, I know certainly for me, is that in order to effectively help her, especially if I were in Japan, I would need to have a little bit more understanding and have some work I'd have to do in order to be able to be effective.
Yes, I agree. And I think about how the way I looked at her before I saw the picture in context, it determined how much compassion I had for her.
Mm,
It also just kind of determined just what decisions or what steps I would have taken, as you said, to help her in the big picture. I'm thinking this first picture is her alone. She's trying to escape something. So I'm thinking if I help her, would I be safe in
mm,
helping her? Am I helping to, is there someone going to come after me as well? you know,
yeah.
um, but when it comes to the bigger picture, you see that she definitely needs resources. She needs support. She needs all of those things because it is a very different story that is being played out. And so, as we think about how our beliefs and our values and our experiences influence our actions, I want to draw our attention to Zaretta Hammond's work around the three levels of culture. So, in this image, she identifies three levels of culture, first being surface, next shallow, and deep. And as you can see on the three levels, the emotional charge increases, starting from low emotional charge to strong and then intense. The surface level or the observable elements in the lowest emotional charge of culture is really around what you see. The things are right that are right there before you. So going back to our beliefs and our values, there are things that influence us as coaches or as individuals that support others. So think about your role. As you are supporting teachers, there are things that are going to influence. What are the books that you are reading? What are the articles that you're reading? What about conferences, sessions that you are going to that help you to be a better coach? But when you think about those individuals or those influences that impact you as a coach, I want you to think about the diversity or maybe lack of diversity in the voices that are pouring into you as a coach. Who are those individuals? If you have diverse individuals or if you have a set of diverse voices that are pouring into you or that are supporting you in your work to work with teachers, the next question would be, what are you doing with that information? What are you doing with that scholarship? Is it simply that I have a book around how to be equitable in my approach to support teachers or to support students, that it is a read, a great read, but it stays there? It stays on the pages. That would be surface level. But going to the shallow level, that would be those unspoken rules, those social norms. How does the scholarship influence my actions and my decisions that I'm going to make when having conversations with teachers on ways to be equitable in our approach, to disrupt systems, to transform or to help to transform behaviors so that we are not speaking from a place of lack or oppression, but that we are actually liberating the students that are being supported. And then lastly, deep level. which is the intense emotional charge. Going back to our beliefs and our values and how they directly impact the decisions that we are making with teachers and the beliefs that we have about this work and how teachers could directly influence, liberate, celebrate joy, disrupt systems with that affect our students. And so that would be, again, our beliefs and our values. How does the learning that we've experienced, the books that we're reading, the conferences that we're attending, the professional learning that we are engaging in, how does that leave the pages? How does it leave the session and transform us so that we then can help to transform or provide spaces in which teachers are able to do this work? So, thinking about the different types of coaching, coaching for academics as well as coaching for equity. Now, there's a difference. Both are very much needed, but it's important that we understand that these are not one in the same. Coaching for the focus is really around content or a particular resource. But when we're thinking about coaching for equity, the conversation is different. The focus is on knowledge, having a knowledge of systems or of oppression and its impact on self, ourselves, as well as our teachers and our students. In Elena Aguilar's book, Coaching for Equity, she talks about these characteristics and how they are different from simply just coaching for academics. Another thing to think about when coaching for academics, you're focusing on creating spaces to learn and about a practice or to practice content, curriculum, as well as resources. But when coaching for equity, you are very intentional on creating safe and trusting conditions in which adults can learn and practice and reflect. Remember, teacher agency is accomplished or happens when teachers feel safe, they feel like they're in a trusting environment so that they can share and be vulnerable in this work. And lastly, coaching for academics, thinking about equipping others with the tools to support their ability to scaffold learning and implement strategies, to differentiate, to better understand content. But when thinking about coaching for equity, it is for the purpose of equipping others with tools to interrupt systems of oppression or injustice that appears in their teaching practice.
And so, with that, the question becomes, how do we do that? Well, what we want to do is talk to you a little bit about transformational coaching. Now, what we're going to do is look at the transformational coaching model to see how we actually coach for equity. Transformational coaching is holistic. It attends to the components that we develop in ourselves. So we have to think about ourselves first and how we are reacting and responding. We pay attention to that. We pay attention to our beliefs, our ways of beings, and our behaviors as educators. And then as coaches, we take our teachers through a transformational coaching process in which we ask them to do and look at the same. So, as you are thinking about transformational coaching, let's talk a little bit about what that entails, right? Because what we want to do is we want to make sure that we are coaching the individual. And these are some of the things that we coach them in. We first start off by coaching beliefs. And our beliefs are going to be related to what we think and what we believe as individuals. And we want to make sure that we pay attention to that because it is the first line of fire. So when we think about the little girl that we looked at, right? Our beliefs, our exposures very much impacted how we thought about the type of help that she needed. Our beliefs very much come from our upbringing, how we are raised, and the different things that we're exposed to. The next thing that we want to look at when we are thinking about coaching the individual is we want to look at their way of being. And when we think about someone's way of being, we are thinking about their sense of identity. We are thinking about the way they behave every day. What are the things that they are doing? How are they showing up? And how are our students experiencing them? It is certainly a blend of our dispositions as well as our sense of identity. So we're going to think about both of those things when we are thinking about the individuals that we are coaching. And last but not least, we want to think about their behavior. And so when we're thinking about behavior, this is going to refer to what we actually do. When we are in schools, we're thinking about our ability to design lessons. We're thinking about the ways in which instruction is delivered. We're thinking about the ways in which a productive learning environment is being created. How are we analyzing data? And we're thinking about how those behaviors from a coaching lens can be captured so that we can make sure we are helping our teachers when they are going through this cycle. The next thing that I want us to think about is what happens during this actual cycle. So that's what we're going to talk about. What actually happens during this cycle? So the first thing that happens during this cycle is that we want to work to surface the current realities of our teachers. And what we do there is we think about what is happening and we want to gain an understanding of what is happening. What are the challenges that the teacher might be facing? What are their strengths as well as their opportunities for growth? We want to make sure that we can clearly see the teacher's practices and what they're doing. We want to make sure that we understand their why. Why did they get into teaching in the first place? We want to understand their vision for themselves. How do they see themselves as educators? And how do they identify their own strengths? And so during this phase, we would actually watch these teachers in action. We are going to observe a lesson in the classroom to see what's happening. And in that process, we're going to listen for some mental models, right? What are some things that are originating in actual oppressive ideologies? And within those oppressive ideologies, how are they resulting in inequitable experiences for the student? How is it impacting the outcomes for the students? So, all of that is what we are going to do when we are surfacing their current reality. And then the next part is going to be the recognition. We have to make sure that we help teachers to recognize the impact. So, as the coach, your role is going to be to help the teachers to see how their behaviors, how their beliefs, how their ways of being are actually perpetuating systemic oppression. And that's a tough one. As the coach, you want to make sure that you are gathering data because these are, of course, very difficult pieces to have to admit to yourself if it's happening. So the coach has to make sure that they are gathering data that does actually reveal the impact of those practices on the students. And guys, this part is important because if you don't actually have that information, if you haven't taken that data, it's sometimes very hard as an individual, if you didn't plan any harm, to be able to accept that this might be part of what's happening in your classroom. Once we see the impact and we help them to recognize the impact, there is a space that we have to give for exploring emotions. You can imagine, I know for most of us, if I do something to someone that's harmful and I don't intend it, it can be really difficult for me to resolve within myself what I may have done. And so, as coaches, we have to be very cognizant of leaving space for the emotions, space to explore, to accept the impact, to release those emotions and be at a place where they are ready to move on. And in this place, as a coach, you are going to remind them that, listen, that's okay. You were there, and here's where we move into a new space. And so you're going to work with that teacher. You're going to work with them to create new practices. And in creating new practices, it is a side by side process. You work with the teacher to plan, to observe their lessons, and to offer feedback. Some things that could also happen, you may analyze student work together once you have come up with a new system and a new way of delivering instruction. What's going to be important is that you're going to guide teachers towards making connections. You want them to see that the old behavior yielded certain results, but that this new behavior results in new practices that you create, which result in new outcome for students. Now, I know that's a lot, that's quite a process, but it's very important for us as educators and as coaches to take ourselves through the process, and then as coaches to walk our teachers through this process to ensure that equitable practices are happening across all of our classrooms in all of our buildings.
So now here's our call to action. We talked about in this session how our beliefs and our values directly impact our decisions. In the example that Ms. Thomas went through, was a great picture of how something out of context could possibly force us or influence us to make an an improper decision about students. And we, as supporters of teachers, could possibly do the same. So it's important that when we look at this work and when we are engaging in this work, that we're not thinking through one lens, but that we are open to hear multiple perspectives, that we're open to hear multiple experiences and being understanding and empathetic to how we are supporting teachers and what our expectations are around how teachers are able to do this work. So, here are some things to remember as we are supporting this work with teachers as we continue on the journey ourselves. The first thing is that your beliefs matter. Acknowledging that our experiences and our perceptions create bias, and that those biases could show up in our expectations that we have, again, for teachers to do this work, as well as what we expect about students. Be reflective. We're not going to always get it right, but it is important that as we are disrupting systems, as we are unlearning in order to learn, as we are helping teachers to rethink what this actually looks like in their classrooms, as well as in their planning, we should be the model of what that reflection looks like as we are creating spaces that are safe and trusting, that teachers see us being reflective so that in turn they see examples of what it looks like and that they are okay with working through this messy and this murky work, that they understand that it is not clean. There is not a cookie cutter way of approaching this to disrupt systems that are harmful. And that again, we are transforming into being a better version of ourselves to show up for our students. And then lastly, being intentional, thinking of ways that we are intentional. Yes, we are embarking on this self work. And yes, we are being models to help teachers to be reflective and transform themselves as well. But what are those next steps? It shows up in our lesson planning. It shows up in our conversations around data. It shows up in our the resources that we're using. So it's important that we are intentional in this work. And lastly, we'll close with a quote from Audrey Lorde, who is an African American poet. She's so much more, but for some, you may know her as a great African American poet, a great poet. When I dare to be powerful, to use my strength in the service of my vision, it becomes less important whether I am afraid. And so we leave you with that thought. We know that our beliefs and our values impact our work, but it's important that we understand that as we are journeying through disrupting systems, that we are okay with having courageous conversations with teachers as well as our colleagues as we work together to get better. That we come from, of course, a place of love, a place of compassion, but we are holding each other accountable so that we are able to disrupt systems that are harmful to students. Ms. Thomas, would you like to close with
Well,
anything else?
I just want to say thank you out there to everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this session. We hope that you will go out and be the change that you want to see in the world. This is just one small piece of many things that you can do in order to be that change. But we encourage you to go out to try transformational coaching in your buildings and see the difference that it will make for you and for your teachers in your spaces. Thank
Yes.
you.
And so here are some ways. It's funny as you were talking, every time I hear the term be the change, I think of the great work of Sarah Ahmed's book, Be the Change. And so
Yeah.
there are so many when we talk about our personal professional development journey, our personal professional learning journey, that we're thinking about a people that are actually doing this work and really learning and growing on our own so that as we show up for our teachers, as we show up for our students, that we are looking through the lens of multiple perspectives, that we are looking through the lens of multiple experiences, that it's not just a one-sided experience, but we are just really being reflective as we are changing and again unlearning so that we could be our best selves for others that are around us and for ourselves as well. So we leave you with our contact information if you want to just continue learning with us. Here are our Twitter handles. Hopefully you have been tweeting along the way. Here are our email addresses as well if you want to have us come out and to support you, your school, your district, your organization with this work. We are open and willing to do that. And we want to keep in touch, or if you would like to direct message us, whatever it is, remember, we are in this together. We are better together.
Absolutely. Take care, everyone.
Yes, goodbye.